We're going with Amber for the VP position. I still remember exactly how the air felt when those words hit me, like someone had sucked all the oxygen from the room. My lungs burned. My cheeks flushed hot with humiliation as I sat across from Martin, our CEO, in that sleek conference room where I'd presented hundreds of winning strategies over the years. "I don't understand," I managed to say, my voice embarrassingly small. "My numbers are the best in the department. I've been here for 25 years? Yes, Diana, we know." Martin's smile didn't reach his eyes. He tapped his Mont Blanc pen against my performance review, the one showing I'd exceeded every target. "And we value that loyalty. But Crestwood needs fresh blood, new perspectives. Amber brings energy the clients respond to. Fresh blood. Like mine had somehow curdled after turning 48. "She's been here 6 months," I whispered, feeling something crack inside me. "I built those client relationships. I trained her." Martin leaned forward, lowering his voice like he was doing me a favor. "Look, this isn't personal. The board feels Amber's more aligned with where we're heading. The tech landscape moves fast. We need someone who can keep up." Keep up, as if I hadn't been sprinting ahead of everyone else for decades. I nodded mechanically, stood up on legs that didn't feel like mine, and walked out past the glass-walled offices where everyone pretended not to watch. Past Amber's desk, where she sat with her perfect blonde topknot, already changing her email signature to include Vice President of Client Relations. My position. My life. "Hi, I'm Diana Mercer, 48 years old. Mother of 2 college-aged kids I raised mostly alone after my ex decided fatherhood cramped his entrepreneurial spirit. Career woman who believed that excellence would always be rewarded. Fool who gave her prime years to a company that discarded her the moment her crow's feet became visible in video calls. Before I dive deeper into what happened next, because trust me, this story takes some turns even I couldn't have predicted. Take a second to like this video and subscribe. I read every comment, so tell me where you're watching from. I never thought I'd be sharing something this personal online, but after what happened, I realized keeping quiet only protects the wrong people. Let me back up a little. Crestwood Technologies wasn't always the soulless place it became. When I joined at 23, fresh out of college with a marketing degree and student loans crushing my shoulders, it was a scrappy tech consulting firm with big dreams. 15 employees crammed into an office above a Chinese restaurant, the smell of kung pao chicken perpetually wafting through our vents. I was hired as an assistant account manager, but within 3 years, I was handling our biggest clients solo. By 30, I was bringing in accounts that transformed us from local outfit to regional player. By 40, my client portfolio was worth over $200 million annually. I got married somewhere in there, had kids, got divorced when Tom decided his cycling instructor understood him better than his workaholic wife. Through it all, Crestwood was my constant, my identity, my security. Martin joined as CEO 8 years ago when our founder retired. He came from a bigger firm with slick presentations about disruption and youth culture. Suddenly, our offices were renovated with nap pods and cold brew on tap. Our average employee age dropped by a decade. I adapted, learned TikTok, changed my wardrobe, worked harder, stayed later. Never complained when 20-somethings were promoted around me into newly created positions with vague titles and higher salaries. Play the long game, my friend Vivian advised over wine nights. You know the clients, you have the relationships. They can't replace that. I believed her. Stupid, right? When our VP of Client Relations announced his retirement, I thought my moment had finally arrived. I'd been doing half his job already for years. Clients asked for me by name. My performance reviews were flawless. Then came Amber Chen, 28, Stanford MBA, former collegiate volleyball player with legs for days and that effortless confidence of someone who's never been told no. Martin hired her personally as a senior account strategist and started inviting her to leadership meetings within weeks. I trained her myself, introduced her to our key accounts, shared contact information I'd cultivated for years, showed her our systems, our processes, our shortcuts, because I'm a team player. because I thought demonstrating my leadership would prove I deserved that VP title. 6 months later, I sat in that conference room while Martin explained why I was too old for the job I'd essentially been doing already. That night, I sat in my car in the parking garage for 2 hours, unable to drive home. Unable to face my daughter Emma, home from college for spring break, who'd already texted, "Did you get it?" with excited emojis. I couldn't bear to tell her that mommy wasn't valued anymore, that all those missed birthdays and school plays I'd sacrificed for work meant nothing in the end. I finally drove home in a daze, told Emma I was fighting a migraine, and locked myself in my bathroom. Stared at my reflection, the lines around my mouth, the gray I carefully covered every 3 weeks, the slight softness under my chin that hadn't been there 5 years ago. Is this what failure looks like? I whispered to myself. The next morning, I put on my armor, my best blazer, extra concealer, a smile that hurt my face, walked into the office like nothing had happened. Congratulated Amber with words that tasted like ash in my mouth. "I'm so excited to learn from you," she said, eyes wide with what looked like genuine admiration. "You're literally a legend here." A legend. Like I was already part of the company's ancient history. The announcement email went out that afternoon. My phone blew up with texts from colleagues, mostly the other veterans over 40, expressing outrage, sympathy, promises to meet for drinks soon. I responded with gracious platitudes, professional to the end. But something had fundamentally shifted inside me. A lifetime of playing by the rules, of believing hard work would be rewarded, crumbled like sand between my fingers. The following weeks were a special kind of hell. Amber began restructuring the department. Suddenly, my direct reports were reassigned. My corner office was needed for a collaboration space, so I was moved to a desk in the open floor plan, sandwiched between two recent graduates who played EDM through their headphones loud enough for me to hear the bass. My job title remained the same, but my responsibilities dwindled. I wasn't invited to strategy meetings anymore. Clients I'd worked with for 15 years were officially transitioned to younger account managers under Amber's supervision. "We want to make sure our clients have continuity if you decide to retire," Martin explained when I finally confronted him, as if 48 was one step from the nursing home. I started having panic attacks in the shower each morning, lost 10 pounds I couldn't afford to lose, began searching job listings at night, only to find that comparable positions at other companies all seemed to use code words like energetic, digital native, and startup mentality. My son Zach, calling from his sophomore year at UCLA, noticed something was wrong. "Mom, you sound different. Are you okay?" "Just tired, honey," I lied. "Big project at work." The truth was, I had almost nothing to do at work anymore. I'd been sidelined so completely it was like I'd already been fired, but without the severance package. I started calculating how long I could survive on my savings if I quit, how I'd explain the gap on my resume, whether I could afford both kids' tuition without my salary. Then came the Williams account crisis. Williams Aerospace was our biggest client, a $50 million annual contract that represented nearly 20% of Crestwood's business. I'd personally managed their account for 17 years, through 3 different CEOs on their end. Their current CEO, Robert Williams, son of the founder, had been a rising executive when I first started working with them. We'd grown in our careers in parallel. Amber had been especially eager to take over Williams. In meetings, she kept referring to Robert as Bob, though everyone knew he despised the nickname, and talking about modernizing their approach. 3 months after her promotion, Williams missed a quarterly review meeting. Then they rescheduled and missed again. Their invoices, previously paid like clockwork, became mysteriously delayed. I heard whispers but kept my head down. Not my problem anymore, right? Then came that Wednesday morning. I was at my sad little desk, updating my LinkedIn profile, when Martin appeared beside me, face ashen. "Diana, conference room. Now." Inside, I found Amber pacing, her usual composure shattered. 2 board members were on the video screen, looking grim. "What's going on?" I asked, taking a seat. Martin ran his hands through his thinning hair. "Williams is threatening to cancel their contract. All of it. Effective immediately." The room seemed to tilt sideways. On what grounds? They claim we've been unresponsive to their needs, that our new strategies don't align with their company culture. Martin wouldn't meet my eyes. Robert Williams is demanding to speak to you personally. Says if you're not on the call this afternoon, they're walking. I felt a dangerous flutter of satisfaction beneath my ribs. Me? But I'm not on the account anymore. This isn't funny, Diana, Amber snapped, her voice higher than usual. We could lose everything. You need to fix this. Fix this. After they'd pushed me aside. After they'd made it clear I was obsolete. What exactly do you want me to do? I asked, my voice perfectly level. Whatever it takes, Martin said. Tell Williams there was a miscommunication, that you're still involved, that Amber works under your supervision. I let his words hang in the air for a moment, feeling the weight of them, the desperation. That would be lying, I finally said. The room went silent. One of the board members leaned toward their camera. Ms. Mercer, I understand you must feel overlooked given recent organizational changes. But surely you care about the company's survival. Did I, though? That was the question turning over in my mind as I sat there, suddenly holding all the power I'd been told I no longer deserved. I need to think, I said, standing up, and I'll need to review the Williams file to understand what's happened before I can help. Of course, Martin said quickly. Anything you need. Amber will get you full access again. I walked out, feeling their eyes on my back. For the first time in months, I stood straight. In the bathroom, I locked myself in a stall and pressed my forehead against the cool metal door. My heart raced, but not with anxiety this time, with possibility. With the sudden, dizzying awareness that I'd been handed leverage I never expected to have. Robert Williams hadn't contacted me by accident. We'd had dinner just last month. A catching up between old friends thing I hadn't bothered to mention to anyone at Crestwood. He'd asked pointed questions about my career, noted that I seemed less enthusiastic than usual. I'd been vague, protective of my professional image even then. He must have connected the dots when Amber started handling his account. My phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Meeting with Williams set for 3 p.m. Please be prepared. I closed my eyes and allowed myself, just for a moment, to consider options I'd never let myself contemplate before. The loyalty that had defined my career suddenly felt like chains I could finally shrug off. By the time I walked back to my desk, a decision was crystallizing in my mind, one that would either secure my future or burn everything to the ground. Either way, I wouldn't be anyone's legend anymore. I'd be their reckoning. I pulled up my personal email and began composing a message to Robert Williams. My fingers didn't shake at all as I typed. Robert, we need to talk before the 3 p.m. call. There are things you should know. Robert responded within minutes. Diana, expected to hear from you. Call my private line ASAP. I glanced around the office. Amber was huddled with Martin in his glass-walled office, both gesturing frantically. No one was watching me. I grabbed my purse, walked calmly to the stairwell, and called Robert once the heavy metal door closed behind me. This explains so much, he said after I'd laid out the situation. My demotion in everything but name, how I'd been systematically pushed aside. The new proposals from Crestwood are garbage, complete misunderstanding of our needs. Amber's smart, I said, surprising myself with my fairness. Just inexperienced. Smart doesn't help me when the board is breathing down my neck about wasted marketing dollars. Robert's voice hardened. Look, I didn't call just because I miss working with you, though I do. Our numbers are down 12% since they took you off our account. My CFO's talking about finding a new agency altogether. My heart pounded as I paced the concrete stairwell. What exactly do you want, Robert? You. Back on our account, fully empowered. Or we walk. He paused. Unless you've got one foot out the door already? The question hung between us. Did I? Should I? I need to think about what's best for me now, I answered carefully. Well, think fast. I meant what I said. If you're not running point for us by end of week, we're pulling the contract. And Diana? You might want to check your email more often. There are people who still value experience in this industry. We hung up, and I checked my personal email again. 3 messages from competing agencies all sent within the past month, all with subject lines like opportunity to discuss and confidential interest in your expertise. I'd been so busy trying to save my position at Crestwood that I hadn't even noticed the recruiters circling. For the first time in months, I felt a genuine smile form. I had options. I had leverage. I had power. Walking back into the office, I felt like a different person than the one who'd left minutes before. Martin spotted me and waved me into his office urgently. "What did Williams say? Have you spoken to him?" His forehead glistened with sweat. "Not yet," I lied smoothly. "But I've reviewed what's happened with the account. Mind if I sit?" I took the chair across from his desk without waiting for permission. The power chair. The one visitors rarely got to use. "We don't have time," Martin began. "Actually, we do," I interrupted, enjoying the startled look on his face. "The call's not for 3 hours. And before I salvage this situation, we need to be clear about terms." Amber, who had been standing by the window, turned sharply. "Terms?" "Yes." I crossed my legs, adjusting my blazer. "If I'm going to convince Williams to stay, I need to know exactly what my role will be moving forward." Martin's relief was visible. He thought this was just a negotiation for a better title, maybe more money. "Of course, Diana. We value your contribution enormously." "Stop." I held up a hand. "Let's not pretend. 6 months ago, I was too old, too outdated for leadership. Now you need my relationships to save the company. So here's what's going to happen." I laid out my demands clearly. Full reinstatement as led on the Williams account, a senior VP title above Amber, and a compensation package that reflected my value to the company. Martin and Amber exchanged glances. "We'd need board approval for some of this," he hedged. "Then get it, before the call." I stood up. "I'm going home to prepare. I'll be back at 2:30. "You can't just leave," Amber started. "Watch me." I walked out, feeling their stunned gazes on my back. At home, I kicked off my heels and made myself a proper lunch for the first time in years. No sad desk salad today. As I ate, I opened my laptop and began to review those recruiting emails more carefully. Phoenix Marketing Group wanted to discuss a senior director position. Meridian Consultants mentioned bringing your client portfolio. The third, from Ellis, Warner, was the most intriguing. They were opening a new division focused on legacy clients and wanted someone with established relationships in the aerospace sector. I picked up my phone and made a call. "Vivian, it's me. Remember that scenario we discussed over wine last month? I need your legal expertise. How enforceable is my non-compete, really?" Vivian, my oldest friend and a cutthroat corporate attorney, laughed. "Depends how badly you want to burn the bridge, honey. Let's just say I've got matches and gasoline ready." By the time I walked back into Crestwood at 2:27, I had 3 meetings scheduled with competing agencies, a clear understanding of exactly how to navigate my non-compete clause, and a secondary email sent to Robert Williams with some interesting attachments. Martin, Amber, and now the full executive team waited in the conference room. A contract sat at my place, the promised promotion and raises, already signed by the board chairman. "Diana," Martin's smile was too wide, too desperate. "We're so pleased to offer you this enhanced role. The board met virtually and unanimously approved everything you asked for." I picked up the contract, flipped through it without sitting down. "Thank you. This looks comprehensive." Relief flooded his face. "Excellent. Now, about the Williams call. I've been thinking about how to approach this," I said, placing the unsigned contract back on the table. "And I believe honesty is the best policy." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What does that mean exactly?" asked our CFO, Garrett, his eyes narrowing. "It means I'm going to tell Robert Williams the truth, that I was pushed aside because of my age, that the company values youth over experience, that I was excluded from leadership because I didn't fit the image Crestwood wanted to project." Martin's face drained of color. "That would be extremely unprofessional." "Would it?" I tilted my head. "More unprofessional than what happened to me? More unprofessional than lying to a $50 million client about who's actually running their account?" "You can't possibly," Amber started. "I absolutely can," I cut her off. Unless what?" Martin demanded. I pulled my own document from my bag and slid it across the table. unless you sign this instead. It wasn't just a revised employment contract. It was a separation agreement. 3 years salary as severance. Full benefits continuation. And most importantly, a complete waiver of my non-compete and non-solicitation clauses. You're quitting? Martin looked bewildered. After fighting for the promotion? I'm not fighting for a promotion, I corrected him. I'm fighting for what I'm worth. And Crestwood has made it abundantly clear that it doesn't value what I bring to the table. So yes, I'm leaving. The only question is whether I leave with Williams Aerospace as a client or whether I help you keep them. The executives exchanged panicked glances. Garrett picked up my separation agreement, scanning it with growing alarm. This is extortion, he sputtered. This is business, I replied calmly. You taught me that loyalty means nothing. Consider this my final lesson learned. The Williams call was scheduled to begin in 7 minutes. I could practically hear the executives' minds racing, calculating the cost of my severance against the loss of their biggest client. We can discuss a counteroff, Martin began. No counteroffers, I interrupted. Sign or I tell Robert everything. Diana. Amber's voice was quiet now. All the confidence drained away. I never meant to. Save it. I checked my watch. 5 minutes. Martin grabbed the agreement, scrawled his signature with a shaking hand, and shoved it toward the CFO, who did the same. One by one, the executives signed, their faces a mix of fury and defeat. I took the document, verified all signatures, and tucked it safely away. Thank you for your prompt decision. Then I sat down at the conference table and dialed Robert Williams on speaker just as the clock hit 3:0. Robert, it's Diana Mercer. I have the Crestwood executive team here with me. Diana. His voice boomed through the speaker. Good to hear your voice. I was beginning to think they were holding you hostage. I smiled at the executives' uncomfortable faces. Not at all. In fact, we've been having a productive conversation about the future of the Williams account. For the next hour, I walked Robert through a transition plan 1, where I would personally oversee his account for the next 3 months to ensure continuity before Amber took over completely. I praised Amber's strategic thinking while emphasizing the need for her to better understand Williams' specific needs. I was the consummate professional. By the end of the call, Robert had agreed to stay with Crestwood for now, with quarterly reviews and the understanding that I would be available for consultation even after the transition. When the call ended, the room sat in stunned silence. You saved the account, Martin finally said. After everything, you still saved it. I honored my commitments. I corrected him. Something this company should try sometime. I gathered my things and stood up. My resignation is effective immediately. I'll have my personal items out by end of day. HR can mail my final check. Where are you going? Amber asked, her voice small. I paused at the door. To a company that understands that experience isn't a liability, it's their competitive advantage. 3 months later, I sat in my new corner office at Ellis, Warner, where I'd been hired as executive vice president of their newly formed legacy client division. My salary was 40% higher than my highest earnings at Crestwood. My team was diverse in every way, including age. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert Williams. Contracts up for renewal next month. Crestwood's latest proposal is underwhelming. Free for lunch Thursday? I smiled as I typed back. Always time for you, Robert. The official ethics policy at Ellis.Warner prohibited poaching clients from former employers for 12 months after hiring. But there was nothing that prevented clients from following a trusted advisor on their own initiative, especially when that trusted advisor had legally exited her non-compete clause. My assistant knocked on my door. Your daughter's on line 1. I picked up. Emma, how's the internship going? Amazing, she gushed. Mom, my supervisor says I have a real shot at a permanent position after graduation. That's wonderful, honey. It's because of you, she said, her voice softening. Watching you stand up for yourself, start over, it taught me so much. I blinked back unexpected tears. Everything I did was for you and Zach. I know, but you also did it for yourself. That's the part I needed to see. After we hung up, I walked to my window overlooking the city. The same city where I'd spent 25 years building someone else's dream. Now, finally, I was building my own. My phone buzzed again. A news alert. Crestwood Technologies had announced a restructuring after losing 3 major accounts. Their stock had dropped 17% on the news. The article mentioned that Martin had stepped down as CEO. I didn't feel the vicious satisfaction I'd expected, just a quiet certainty that justice sometimes arrives on its own schedule. The following week, Amber Chen sent me a LinkedIn request with a message. I learned more from watching you leave than I did in all our time working together. If you ever have an opening on your team, I'd love to talk. I considered it for a long moment before accepting her connection. Not her implied request. She still had lessons to learn, but the acknowledgement of what had happened. Because the truth is, revenge wasn't about destroying Crestwood or hurting Amber or Martin. It wasn't even about the money. Though the financial security was sweet vindication, real revenge was finding my worth outside the company that discarded me. It was discovering that the relationships I'd built were mine, not theirs. It was walking away on my terms, head high, future, secure. At 48, I wasn't too old. I was just getting started. And that, my friends, is the most satisfying revenge of all. I've received some disturbing feedback about your performance, Serena. Colton's voice sliced across the conference room table as he adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses. 20 minutes into what I thought was a routine project update, and my career was unraveling before my eyes. Feedback? My voice sounded small, even to my own ears. The entire design team reports you're impossible to work with. The marketing division says you consistently undermine their strategies. Accounting claims you've been challenging budget allocations without authorization. He slid a manila folder toward me, its contents spilling across the polished wood. And now these production reports. The familiar spreadsheets, my spreadsheets, stared back at me. The ones detailing the degrading heat-resistant coatings on our industrial kitchen equipment. The ones I'd submitted through proper channels 17 times. You've made too many enemies here, Colton continued, leaning forward. You've broken too many rules. Working here is not safe for you. The air conditioning vent above whirred loudly in the silence that followed. These reports show equipment failures that could harm people, I said, voice steadier than I felt. I've been trying to address this for months. You've been trying to make yourself the hero by creating problems where none exist, he corrected, tapping his pen against the table. We've been manufacturing this equipment for 15 years without issue. The suppliers changed 6 months ago. The new coatings are within industry standards. His tone left no room for debate. The problem isn't the equipment, Serena. It's you. You transferred from assembly to quality control and suddenly think you know better than everyone else. My fingers traced the burn scar on my left wrist, a permanent reminder of my years on the production line. I knew this equipment better than anyone in management ever would. I've scheduled meetings with clients who return damaged units, I said. I can prove. You will cancel those meetings immediately. Colton's face flushed red. That's exactly the kind of unauthorized action I'm talking about. The decision has already been made. Either resign with a decent reference, or we terminate with cause for insubordination. The door swung open without a knock. Desmond Parker stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the space. The company's CEO, a man who typically operated from the executive floor and rarely appeared in department meetings, was staring directly at us. Actually, he said, I think we're the ones who aren't safe. Colton's face went chalk white. Mr. Parker, this is just a routine. I heard everything, Colton. Desmond walked to the table, picked up one of my reports, and studied it. And I'd like to know why the board wasn't informed about these findings. The silence stretched like a rubber band, ready to snap. Sir, I began. I can explain. No need, Desmond interrupted. I believe I understand exactly what's happening here. He turned to Colton with a gaze that could have frozen fire. And it stops today. If you're following this story, take a moment to like and subscribe, because what happened next changed not just my career, but the entire culture of Parker Industrial Equipment. My name is Serena Ray. Before I became the center of a corporate scandal that would eventually make headlines in the manufacturing industry, I was simply the woman who knew machines better than people. Growing up, watching my grandmother wheeze from decades of working in poorly ventilated kitchens had made me passionate about workplace safety, long before I understood the term. When I transferred from the assembly line to quality control, I brought 5 years of hands-on experience. The burn scars on my arms were my resume, each one telling a story about the equipment I now inspected. People respected me on the production floor. They knew I wouldn't ask anyone to do something I hadn't done myself. That respect evaporated the moment I moved upstairs. You need to dress differently if you want to be taken seriously, Brooke from Human Resources had advised during my first week, eyeing my practical clothes with thinly veiled disdain. This isn't the factory floor anymore. I'd nodded and continued wearing my button-ups and sensible pants. After all, I still spent half my day testing equipment. Why dress for show when I needed function? Isolating me started slowly. First came the forgotten meeting invites. Then, the silent treatment in the break room. When I submitted my first quality concern about the new heat-resistant coatings, production manager Riley had smiled condescendingly. The suppliers passed all regulatory requirements, he explained as if talking to a child. These changes saved us 20% on production costs. But the long-term durability is theoretical at best. We don't make decisions based on theories, Serena. Every week brought new obstacles. Access codes to testing labs mysteriously reset. Equipment I flagged for inspection disappeared before I could document problems. Email threads about quality concerns excluded me midway through discussions. I started keeping duplicate records, testing samples during unpaid hours, and building relationships with maintenance staff at client locations who would give me honest feedback about equipment performance. The first evidence came 3 months after the supplier change. A restaurant chef with respiratory issues after extended exposure to a malfunctioning unit. Then, another. Then, 7 more. I compiled everything, created a comprehensive report, and submitted it through proper channels. The report disappeared. I submitted it again. It was under review, indefinitely. 2 nights ago, I'd finally emailed the CEO directly, breaking every unwritten rule about chain of command. I never expected a response, and I certainly never expected him to show up today. How long have these issues been reported? Desmond asked, flipping through my documentation. The first quality concerns were raised 3 months ago, I said. The first health incident was reported 7 weeks ago. Colton interrupted. These are isolated. 37 cases isn't isolated, Desmond said sharply. And according to these timestamps, Miss Ray raised this issue before any incidents occurred. He turned to me. Why did you contact me directly? The moment hung in the balance. Everything I'd worked for depended on what I said next. Because I tried every official channel first, I said, meeting his eyes. Because people are being harmed by our equipment. And because I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. Desmond nodded slowly. Miss Ray, would you excuse us? I need to speak with Mr. Harrison privately. As I gathered my files, Colton's expression promised retribution. I'd broken the cardinal rule of corporate politics. Never go over your boss's head, even with the CEO's apparent interest. I knew my days were numbered. Outside the conference room, I leaned against the wall, heart hammering. Through the frosted glass, I could see their silhouettes, Desmond gesturing emphatically, while Colton sat rigid. Tracy from accounting passed by, shooting me a look of mingled curiosity and contempt. Career suicide, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear. I closed my eyes and thought of my grandmother, how her hands shook from neurological damage after years of breathing toxic fumes, how she'd still gone to work every day because she had no choice. The conference room door opened. Miss Ray? Desmond called. Please join us again. I stepped back into the conference room. Colton sat unnaturally still, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. Desmond gestured to my former seat. Please, sit down. The air felt different, charged with something I couldn't name. I smoothed my pants and lowered myself into the chair, careful to maintain eye contact with Desmond rather than Colton, whose breathing had become audibly ragged. Miss Ray, Desmond began, I've reviewed your findings and discussed the situation with Mr. Harrison. He paused, tapping his fingers against the table. Effective immediately, I'm establishing a product safety task force to address these concerns. Colton's pen snapped between his fingers, ink bleeding onto his crisp white cuff. And I'd like you to lead it, Desmond continued. The words hung in the air. I waited for the catch, the corporate doublespeak, that would render this apparent victory meaningless. This task force will report directly to me, Desmond clarified. You'll have authority to inspect any aspect of our manufacturing process, interview any employee, and implement necessary safety protocols without departmental approval. Sir, Colton interjected, his voice strained. With all due respect, giving that kind of authority to someone without management experience is exactly what this company needs, Desmond finished. Someone who prioritizes safety over politics. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't what I'd expected, not even close. Mr. Harrison will be taking a temporary leave of absence while we conduct a comprehensive review of departmental practices, Desmond added, not looking at Colton. During which time, Miss Ray, you'll assume oversight of quality control operations. Colton stood abruptly, his chair squealing against the floor. This is outrageous. One disgruntled employee makes unsubstantiated claims, and your 37 documented cases are not unsubstantiated, Desmond cut in, his voice steel. And the emails I've reviewed showing systematic suppression of Miss Ray's concerns suggest this goes beyond a simple oversight. He turned to me. Do you accept this position? 1,000 thoughts crashed through my mind. The sabotage I'd faced, the colleagues who'd turned against me, the battles still to come. But above all, I thought of my grandmother, who never had anyone to fight for her safety. Yes, I said. I accept. Excellent. Desmond stood. I've arranged for you to meet with our legal team immediately. Mr. Harrison, please clear your office by the end of the day. Colton's face contorted with rage as he gathered his things. At the door, he paused long enough to whisper, This isn't over, Serena. Not by a long shot. After he left, Desmond sighed heavily. You should know what you're walking into. Colton has powerful allies in this company, including 2 board members who pushed for the supplier change. Why are you doing this then? I asked. Why risk antagonizing your board? Desmond's expression shifted slightly. Let's just say I have personal reasons for taking safety seriously. He checked his watch. The legal team is waiting in conference room 3. I suggest you start there. The next 48 hours blurred together. I met with lawyers who outlined the potential liability facing the company. I interviewed production workers who confirmed they'd been instructed to ignore my protocols. I compiled evidence of when reports had been altered or buried. By Friday afternoon, I'd moved into Colton's former office, a space 3 times larger than my cubicle, with windows overlooking the factory floor below. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. I could now see everything happening on the production line. Serena, a hesitant knock accompanied the voice. Tracy from accounting stood in my doorway, her usual confidence notably absent. Do you have a minute? Come in, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Tracy perched on the edge of the seat, clutching a folder to her chest. I want to explain about the budget allocations you tried to make for additional testing. The ones that mysteriously got rejected? She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. Colton instructed us to flag all your requests for his personal review, regardless of amount. She slid the folder across my desk. These are the original approval forms you submitted, with his rejection notes. I flipped through the pages, anger building with each one. Colton's handwritten notes were damning. Deny, will impact quarterly profits. Reject, unnecessary testing. Redirect funds to marketing instead. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. Tracy's shoulders slumped. Because I have a 10-year-old with asthma. When I heard these units might be causing respiratory issues. She trailed off. I should have spoken up sooner. Yes, you should have. I agreed, not softening my tone. But you're speaking up now. That counts for something. After Tracy left, I added her documentation to my growing file. The pattern was becoming clear. Systematic suppression of safety concerns to maintain profit margins. The question was how deep it went and how many others were involved. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. Parking garage, level 3, 20 minutes. Come alone. Every instinct warned against meeting an anonymous messenger in a deserted parking garage. But if someone had information they were afraid to share openly. 20 minutes later, I stepped out of the elevator onto the 3rd level of the parking structure. The space was dimly lit and nearly empty, the weekend exodus having cleared out most vehicles. Over here, I turned to see Riley, the production manager, leaning against a concrete pillar. His usual bravado had vanished, replaced by nervous energy as he glanced repeatedly toward the exit. What's this about? I asked, keeping my distance. You need to drop this investigation, he said, voice low. You have no idea what you're messing with. I know exactly what I'm messing with. Defective products that are harming people. Riley ran a hand through his hair. It's bigger than that. The supplier change wasn't just about cost cutting. There are connections. What kind of connections? The kind that get people hurt if they ask too many questions. He stepped closer. Look, I'm not your enemy. I'm trying to help you. Walk away while you still can. I studied his face, the deep shadows under his eyes, the slight tremor in his hands. You're scared. You should be too, he countered. Colton isn't working alone. He's protected. By whom? Riley checked his watch. I've said too much already. Just think about what I told you. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Why warn me at all? He paused, half turning. My sister works at a restaurant that uses our equipment. She's been having breathing problems for months. With that, he disappeared into the stairwell. I drove home in silence, mind racing. Riley's warning had transformed this from a safety issue into something more sinister. If Colton had powerful protection, my new position might be more precarious than I'd realized. My apartment felt especially empty that night. I'd never minded living alone before, had even preferred it. But now, checking the locks twice and drawing all the blinds, I felt exposed. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of shadowy figures in parking garages and faceless board members watching me through windows. Monday morning brought a new challenge. My first company-wide quality team meeting as director. 20 people filed into the conference room, faces ranging from openly hostile to cautiously curious. These were the same colleagues who had ignored my emails, excluded me from discussions, and whispered behind my back for months. I let the silence stretch uncomfortably before speaking. I know what most of you think of me. I began, not bothering with pleasantries. The assembly line worker who doesn't know her place. The troublemaker. The snitch who went over everyone's head. I placed my hands flat on the table. I won't apologize for protecting people's safety. Amber, the procurement specialist who had processed the supplier change, rolled her eyes. Nobody is against safety. You're being dramatic. Am I? I opened my laptop and turned it to face the room. On screen was a video of a chef in a commercial kitchen. As he worked over a cooking range with our logo clearly visible, he began coughing uncontrollably, eventually dropping to his knees, gasping for breath. The room went silent. This happened last week, I said quietly. He worked with our equipment for 4 months before developing symptoms. He's 32 years old with no previous health issues. I closed the laptop. Each of you has a choice to make. Help me fix this and protect our customers, or continue obstructing safety measures. But understand this, I will fix these issues, with or without your cooperation. And if we choose not to help, asked Devin, Colton's former assistant, then update your resumes, I said simply, because this company is changing, starting today. The meeting dissolved into heated discussion, with the room quickly dividing into factions. Some immediately offered support, while others gathered their things and left without another word. By the end, 7 people remained, less than half, but more than I'd expected. What do you need from us? Asked Zora, a quiet engineer who had always been civil, but never openly supportive. Everything you know about the supplier change and why it was pushed through so quickly, I answered. And any documentation you can find about when concerns were raised and how they were handled. As they left to gather information, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could make real change. That hope dimmed considerably when I returned to my office and found Desmond waiting for me, his expression grave. We need to talk, he said, closing the door behind me. The board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. My stomach tightened. About what? About you. He sighed heavily. Colton has filed a formal complaint alleging you've created a hostile work environment and are conducting a witch hunt against management. That's ridiculous. I know that, Desmond interrupted. But 2 board members are backing him. They're questioning my decision to promote you, without board approval. Can they reverse it? They can try. He studied me carefully. How much evidence have you gathered so far? Some. Not enough to conclusively prove who knew what and when. Desmond nodded slowly. Then you have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to find more. The board meeting starts at 10. He headed for the door, then paused. Whatever you do, don't tell anyone what you're looking for. We don't know who else might be involved. After he left, I stared at the mountain of files before me. Somewhere in this mess was the evidence I needed, proof that the safety issues were known, deliberately concealed, and allowed to continue despite documented harm. I called the small team that had stayed after my meeting. I need you all to come back, now, and tell no one what we're doing. As evening fell, we combed through thousands of documents, digital records, email chains, and meeting minutes. The picture that emerged was disturbing but frustratingly incomplete. We could prove Colton had rejected safety concerns and fast-tracked the supplier change, but not why, or who had authorized him to bypass standard protocols. At 11:47 p.m., my phone rang. A local number I didn't recognize. Is this Serena Ray? A woman's voice, low and urgent. Yes. Who is this? My name is Harper. I was Colton's executive assistant before Devin. I heard what's happening. She paused. There's something you need to see. What is it? Not over the phone. Her voice dropped further. Can you meet me? Tonight? Every instinct screamed danger, but I was out of options and out of time. Where? I asked. The diner across from the East Plant entrance. 30 minutes. Come alone. The line went dead before I could respond. I dismissed my exhausted team, telling them to get some rest before tomorrow's board meeting. None of us mentioned the obvious, that without more evidence, tomorrow might be our last day at the company. The diner was nearly empty when I arrived, just a few truck drivers nursing coffee at the counter. In the back booth, a woman with short dark hair watched me enter, her gaze never leaving mine as I approached. Harper? I asked. She nodded once. Sit down and keep your voice low. I slid into the booth across from her. Close up, I could see the tension in her face, the slight tremble in her hands, as she pushed a sealed envelope across the table. What's this? I asked, not touching it. The real reason for the supplier change. Her eyes flicked to the envelope. And why 2 board members are protecting Colton. I reached for the envelope, but she caught my wrist. Before you open this, you need to understand something, Harper whispered. If they find out I gave you this, I'll lose more than my job. These people are dangerous. Then why risk it? Her eyes glistened. My mother died last month. Respiratory failure after working in a kitchen using our equipment. She released my wrist. Open it somewhere private. And Serena, watch your back. As she stood to leave, I asked, why didn't you come forward sooner? Harper paused, a bitter smile crossing her face. I tried. 3 months ago. Ask your CEO what happened to that report. She walked out, leaving me alone with an envelope that suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and a new, disturbing question about exactly whose side Desmond Parker was really on. The envelope burned in my pocket during the drive home. Every set of headlights in my rearview mirror seemed to follow me deliberately. Every red light lasted an eternity. By the time I locked my apartment door behind me, my shirt was damp with sweat, despite the cool night. I placed the envelope on my kitchen table and stared at it. Harper's warning echoed in my mind. Ask your CEO what happened to that report. Had Desmond been playing me all along, setting me up as a scapegoat while pretending to be my champion? With trembling fingers, I broke the seal and emptied the contents onto the table. 3 items fell out: a flash drive, a handwritten letter, and a photograph. The photograph showed Colton shaking hands with a gray-haired man I didn't recognize. They stood in front of a private jet with a company logo I couldn't quite make out. Nothing incriminating on its face. I unfolded the letter. Harper's handwriting was small and precise. Serena, the flash drive contains emails between Colton, board members, Elaine, and Victor, and executives at Northline Chemical. They knew the coding was dangerous months before implementation. They pushed it through anyway because of the arrangement you'll see in the financial documents. The man in the photo is Timothy Walsh, CEO of Northline. His daughter is married to Victor's son. Desmond received my report. He promised to investigate. 3 days later, I was transferred to the Idaho office. When I refused the transfer, I was terminated with a generous severance and strict NDA. Be careful who you trust. Harper. My hands shook as I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. It contained hundreds of files organized by date, each more damning than the last. Email from Colton to Victor. New coding reduces production costs by 43%. Minor safety concerns can be mitigated through warning labels. Reply from Victor. Excellent work. Northline has agreed to the investment terms. Push this through before quarterly review. Documents revealing a complex investment scheme. Northline provided their cheaper, substandard coding at exclusive rates. In exchange, Victor and Elaine channeled company pension fund investments into Northline subsidiaries, generating millions in management fees that were split between the conspirators. Most shocking was an email from Desmond himself, dated 3 months ago. I understand your concerns about the safety reports. Let me handle this internally. No need to create unnecessary panic. The email was addressed to Harper. I sat back, nausea rising in my throat. Desmond had known all along. His apparent support of my investigation was a calculated move. But to what end? Was he part of the scheme? Or playing a deeper game? My phone buzzed with a text. Did you find what you needed? Desmond, checking on my progress. I stared at the message, unsure how to respond. If he was working with Colton and the board members, tipping my hand would be suicide. If he was genuinely on my side, I needed his help. Another text arrived. Don't trust anyone. Not even me. Come prepared tomorrow. What did that mean? Sleep was impossible. I spent the night copying files, organizing evidence, and preparing my presentation for the board. By dawn, my dining table was covered with documents, and my eyes burned from exhaustion. I showered, dressed in my most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit I'd bought for my grandmother's funeral, and packed everything into a leather portfolio Zora had lent me. The company headquarters loomed against the morning sky as I pulled into the parking lot at 8:15 a.m. The board meeting was in less than 2 hours, and I still didn't know if Desmond was ally or enemy. I found Zora waiting by my office door, her expression grim. They cleaned out our workstations last night, she said without preamble. All our files, gone. The others are too scared to come in. My heart sank. All the evidence we gathered? Wiped. I tried to recover what I could. She handed me a small drive. It's not much. I have more, I assured her. Thank you for standing by me. Her normally stoic expression softened slightly. My brother works in a restaurant kitchen. This matters. As Zora left, Desmond appeared at the end of the hallway, beckoning me to follow. I grabbed my things and hurried after him, my mind racing with questions. He led me to a small conference room I'd never seen before, tucked away in a corner of the executive floor. Once inside, he checked the hallway before closing the door. I don't have much time, he said, voice low. They've moved the board meeting up to 9. They're trying to finish this before you can present your findings. Why should I trust you? I demanded. I know you received Harper's report months ago and did nothing. His expression remained neutral. Is that what she told you? I have the emails, Desmond. You told her you'd handle it internally, then shipped her to Idaho. He nodded slowly. Yes, I did, because 3 board members and the head of our largest division were involved in this scheme. I needed time to build a case that wouldn't be buried by their allies. So you've been investigating them all along? Yes, but carefully. Too carefully, perhaps. He grimaced. People have been harmed while I gathered evidence. That's on me. I studied his face, looking for deception. Why tell me now? Because they've forced my hand. Last night, they called an emergency vote of no confidence. They're removing me as CEO at this morning's meeting. The revelation hit like a physical blow. They can do that? With enough votes, yes, and they have them. He checked his watch. You have 30 minutes to get to the boardroom. They won't expect you. They think you're meeting with HR for termination at 9. So what's the plan? Present everything you have. Don't hold back, no matter who it implicates. He handed me a small key, including me, if necessary. What's this for? Safety deposit box at First National. If things go badly today, everything I've collected is there. He headed for the door. One more thing. Whatever happens, remember why you started this fight. My grandmother's face flashed through my mind, her labored breathing, her shaking hands. For the people being harmed, I said. Desmond nodded once, then was gone. The executive floor was eerily quiet as I made my way to the boardroom. Through the glass walls, I could see 11 people seated around the massive table, 9 board members, Colton, and an empty chair presumably for Desmond. I took a deep breath, clutched my portfolio tighter, and pushed open the door. The conversation stopped instantly. 11 heads turned toward me, expressions ranging from shock to thinly veiled fury. Miss Ray, said Elaine, the board chairwoman, this is a closed meeting. I was invited, I replied, moving to the front of the room before anyone could stop me, by the CEO. Mr. Parker is no longer acting as CEO, Victor announced, his jowls quivering with barely contained anger. The board has voted to relieve him of his duties, effective immediately. On what grounds? I asked, connecting my laptop to the presentation system. That's board business, Elaine snapped. You need to leave immediately. Actually, I think you'll want to hear what I have to say first. I pulled up the first document, an email chain between Victor, Elaine, and Colton discussing how to bypass safety protocols for the new coding. Victor lunged for the controls, but I sidestepped him. This is privileged information, he shouted. You are violating multiple confidentiality agreements. I'm preventing a criminal conspiracy, I countered, advancing to the next slide. Financial records showing the kickback scheme. Elaine stood, her voice ice. Security will escort you out. Before they arrive, you might want to see this. I played a video clip of Timothy Walsh explicitly discussing how the board members would be rewarded for pushing through the Northline contract despite minor health concerns. The room fell silent. Several board members I didn't recognize exchanged alarmed glances. Where did you get these records? Asked a silver-haired woman at the far end of the table. From multiple sources, I answered, including employees who were silenced when they tried to report these issues through proper channels. The boardroom door opened, and Desmond walked in, followed by two people in suits I didn't recognize. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Teresa Lin and Special Agent Marco Diaz," Desmond said calmly. "From the Financial Crimes Division." The color drained from Victor's face. "This is outrageous. You can't just bring federal agents into a private board meeting." "We've been investigating Northline Chemical for 18 months, Agent Lin stated. "Mr. Parker has been cooperating for the past 3. "Cooperating?" Elaine's voice shook. "You've been spying on your own board?" "I've been protecting this company from criminal liability," Desmond corrected, "and preventing more people from being harmed by our products." The next hour passed in a blur. Agents confiscated devices, collected statements, and escorted Victor, Elaine, and Colton from the building. The remaining board members huddled with legal counsel, ashen-faced as the magnitude of the situation became clear. "You knew all along," I said quietly to Desmond as we watched the agents work. "You let me run my investigation as cover for theirs. I needed someone they wouldn't suspect," he admitted. "Someone they'd underestimate." "The assembly line worker who didn't know her place," I said, echoing my earlier words. "The person who cared more about safety than politics," he corrected. "I'm sorry for keeping you in the dark. It was the only way to ensure your reactions were genuine. I should have felt angry at being used as a pawn, but strangely, all I felt was relief. The truth was finally coming to light." "What happens now?" I asked. "That depends partly on you." Desmond gestured toward the remaining board members. "They'll need to appoint an interim leadership team to manage this crisis. I've recommended you head a newly formed Safety and Compliance Division." "Me? But I don't have." "You have exactly what we need," he interrupted. "Integrity, knowledge of our products, and first-hand experience with how safety issues affect real people." 2 weeks later, I stood in our largest manufacturing facility, addressing hundreds of employees. Behind me, production lines ran with newly reformulated coatings that exceeded safety standards by 200%. "The events of the past months have taught us a difficult lesson," I began. "Safety isn't just a department or a procedure. It's a culture that begins with each of us refusing to be silent when something isn't right." As I spoke, I saw Zora and the small team who had stood by me nodding in agreement. I saw Tracy from accounting, who had finally found the courage to speak up. I saw production workers who had known me from my assembly line days, their expressions now respectful rather than dismissive. "Today marks the beginning of a new chapter for this company," I continued. "One where we value people's well-being above profit margins, where we listen to concerns regardless of who raises them, where we remember that behind every safety statistic is a human being." After the presentation, as workers filed back to their stations, a young woman approached me hesitantly. "Miss Ray, I'm Nina." She twisted her hands nervously. "I just wanted to thank you. My mother works in a restaurant that uses your equipment." She was having breathing problems, but since they installed the replacement units last week, she's already doing better. My throat tightened. "I'm glad to hear that, Nina. She wanted me to give you this." Nina handed me a small envelope. "She said you'd understand." Inside was a single photograph of an older woman standing proudly in a restaurant kitchen, smiling broadly. On the back was written, "Breathing easier because someone cared enough to speak up. Thank you." I tucked the photo into my pocket, next to the worn picture of my grandmother I always carried. The battle wasn't over. There would be lawsuits, regulatory investigations, and years of rebuilding trust. But standing there, watching workers who no longer had to choose between their jobs and their health, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This was only the beginning. 6 months passed like a whirlwind. The initial chaos of the investigation gave way to the methodical process of rebuilding, both the company and its reputation. I barely recognized my life anymore. The assembly line worker who once fought for basic safety protocols now led a team of 30 safety compliance specialists. My cramped apartment had been traded for a modest house closer to headquarters. And most importantly, not a single respiratory incident had been reported with our new equipment in over 4 months. But the past wasn't finished with us yet. "They've accepted a plea deal," Desmond announced, closing the door to my office behind him. His expression was unreadable as he placed a legal document on my desk. "The prosecutor just called." I scanned the agreement, my pulse quickening with each paragraph. "Reduced charges, no jail time for Victor or Elaine, just fines and community service?" "For the financial crimes, yes." Desmond leaned against the wall, looking every day of his 53 years. The prosecutor says proving criminal intent for the safety violations would be challenging without more documentation. We gave them hundreds of files, I protested, which show negligence, but not explicit intent to harm, he sighed. Corporate law is frustratingly specific about these distinctions. I pushed the document away, anger churning in my stomach. So they walk. After everything they did, they pay a fine that amounts to pocket change for them. And it's over? Not quite. Desmond's mouth twitched slightly. The class action lawsuit from affected workers is proceeding separately. And there's the shareholder derivative suit. Their legal battles are just beginning. It's not enough, I said flatly. Perhaps not. But there's something else. He handed me another document, thinner, with the board's letterhead. This was approved this morning. I skimmed it quickly, then looked up in surprise. A victim compensation fund? Using the company's insurance payout? $10 million to start, earmarked specifically for medical expenses and lost wages for anyone affected by our equipment. Desmond allowed himself a small smile. The board insisted on naming it after you. That's unnecessary. Maybe, but it's happening anyway. He checked his watch. Speaking of which, we should head downstairs. Everyone's waiting. The company cafeteria had been transformed for the occasion. Where institutional tables once stood, now there was a small stage, rows of chairs, and standing room only at the back. Every employee who could be spared from their duties was present. Over 300 people waiting expectantly. As Desmond and I entered, a hush fell over the crowd. "Ready?" he murmured. I nodded, though my stomach twisted with nerves. Public speaking had never been my strength, but some moments demanded pushing beyond comfort zones. Desmond took the podium first, welcoming everyone and briefly recounting the company's turbulent year. Then he gestured for me to join him. 6 months ago, one employee refused to be silenced when she discovered our products were causing harm, he said, his voice carrying through the space. Today, we formally launched the initiative she proposed, the Safety First Certification Program. Applause rippled through the crowd as I stepped forward. Many faces I recognized. Zora in the front row, Tracy from accounting a few seats away, Riley from production standing awkwardly at the back. Others were new, hired during our rapid expansion of the Quality Control Division. Thank you all for coming, I began, finding my voice steadier than expected. This certification program isn't just about our company, it's about transforming our entire industry. I explained the core components: independent testing protocols, surprise inspections, transparent reporting of all safety data, and most importantly, a whistleblower protection system with external oversight. Starting today, every product we manufacture will undergo this certification process, I continued. But we're also opening this program to our competitors. Safety shouldn't be a competitive advantage. It should be the baseline expectation for everyone. The announcement drew surprised murmurs. Inviting competitors to join our program had been contentious among leadership, with some arguing we should leverage our new safety protocols as a market differentiator. I know some see this as giving away our competitive edge, I acknowledged, but I see it differently. Every worker deserves to be safe, regardless of which company's equipment they use. As I concluded my remarks, someone near the back called out, "What about Colton and the board members who were involved?" The room went silent. Desmond shifted uncomfortably beside me. This wasn't in the prepared remarks, but the question deserved an answer. As many of you know, the criminal case has resulted in a plea agreement, I said carefully. Some may find the legal consequences insufficient. I certainly do. Desmond gave me a warning glance, but I continued. However, there's more to justice than criminal penalties. Victor and Elaine have been permanently barred from serving on any corporate board. Their reputations are destroyed. Their assets are tied up in civil litigation that will likely continue for years. I paused, considering my next words. As for Colton, I received word this morning that his attempt to secure a position at Westridge Manufacturing was unsuccessful, after they received an anonymous package detailing his role in our safety failures. A ripple of satisfaction moved through the crowd. I hadn't mentioned that I personally sent that package, along with similar ones to every major manufacturer in our industry. Colton would discover, as he continued his job search, that his name had become radioactive. But the most meaningful consequence isn't what happens to them, I added. It's what we build in their absence. A company where this can never happen again. An industry where safety protocols aren't optional. And a culture where anyone, from the assembly line to the boardroom, can speak up without fear. The applause that followed was thunderous. After the presentation, As employees filed out, I noticed a group of unfamiliar faces waiting near the stage. They wore the uniforms of restaurant workers, chefs, line cooks, kitchen managers. A woman in her 50s stepped forward, her hands bearing the calluses and minor burns familiar to anyone who worked in commercial kitchens. "Miss Ray?" she said, extending her hand. "I'm Isabella. These are my colleagues from restaurants across the city. We wanted to thank you in person." "For what?" I asked, shaking her hand. "For remembering us," she said simply. "We've worked with faulty equipment our entire careers. Companies fix problems only when forced to, and usually with as little effort as possible." Her eyes held mine steadily. "You didn't just fix the problem. You made sure it can't happen again." "We brought you something," said a younger man beside her, holding out a worn cookbook. "It's signed by kitchen staff from 37 restaurants that use your equipment. We want you to have it." I opened the cover to find page after page of signatures, along with brief notes. My breathing improved within weeks of the replacement. No more headaches after 12-hour shifts. My doctor says my lung function is returning to normal. Emotion threatened to overwhelm me. These weren't abstract statistics or liability concerns. These were real people whose lives had been tangibly improved. "Thank you," I managed. "This means more than you know." After they left, Desmond found me still holding the cookbook, rereading the notes inside. "There's one more thing we need to discuss," he said. "The board meeting this morning wasn't just about the compensation fund." I looked up, suddenly wary. Despite all our progress, I'd learned to be cautious about board decisions. "They've approved my transition plan," he continued. "I'm stepping down as CEO at the end of the quarter." "What? Why?" "It's time. The company needs new leadership for this new chapter." He smiled slightly. "They've asked me to recommend my successor." The implication hung in the air between us. "No," I said immediately. "I'm not qualified. I've only been in management for 6 months. I don't have the experience, or—" "You have exactly what this company needs," Desmond interrupted. "Integrity, vision, and the courage to do what's right, regardless of personal cost. The board would never approve me. They already have, unanimously." He handed me yet another document, a formal offer letter. "They're giving you the choice. Take the weekend to think about it." That evening, I drove to the small assisted living facility across town. The familiar scent of antiseptic greeted me as I signed in at the front desk. Room 217 was at the end of the hallway. I knocked gently before entering. The room was modest but comfortable, with large windows overlooking a garden. Photos covered nearly every surface, old black and white snapshots mixed with recent color prints. In the center of them all was a framed newspaper article from 3 months ago, headlined, "Whistleblower Reforms Industrial Safety Standards." "There she is," croaked a voice from the recliner by the window. "The big executive." My grandmother's body had grown frail, but her eyes remained sharp as ever. I kissed her papery cheek before settling into the chair beside her. "Not an executive yet," I corrected, taking her hand in mine. "Maybe soon, though." "They offered you the job?" Her eyebrows rose. "Well, of course they did. Anyone with sense would." I smiled. "It's not that simple, Grandma. Isn't it? You fixed what was broken. You protected people who couldn't protect themselves." She squeezed my hand with surprising strength, just like I always said you would. "I was terrified the whole time," I admitted. "I still am." "Good. Fear keeps you honest." She glanced at the newspaper article. "Your grandfather would have been proud. He always said safety regulations were written in blood, that every protection existed because someone suffered first." "I brought you something." I reached into my bag and pulled out a small plaque. "This will go on the wall of our main production facility tomorrow." She adjusted her glasses to read the inscription. "The Lena Ray Safety Standard. We protect people first, because behind every statistic is someone's grandmother." Tears welled in her eyes. "You named it after me? You're why I fought so hard," I said simply. "Every time I wanted to give up, I remembered what happened to you. How your breathing got worse year after year because no one cared enough to make restaurant kitchens safe." She was quiet for a long moment, her gnarled fingers tracing the letters of her name. "Take the job," she finally said. "Not for me, not even for the workers. Do it because someone needs to show those corporate types that a factory girl can run things better than they ever did." I laughed despite myself. "Is that the only reason?" "No." Her expression grew serious. "Do it because you've already proven you can change things from the inside. Imagine what you could do from the top." 2 days later, I sat in Desmond's office, the acceptance letter signed and dated on his desk between us. "Any reservations?" he asked. About 100, I admitted, but I'm ready. Good. He handed me a small wooden box. This was given to me when I became CEO 15 years ago. Now it's yours. Inside was a simple brass key with no markings. What does it open? The executive washroom. He deadpanned, then laughed at my expression. I'm kidding. It doesn't open anything. It's symbolic. A reminder that leadership means unlocking potential in others, not just exercising your own power. I pocketed the key, touched by the gesture. One more thing, Desmond said, his tone turning serious. The morning of the board meeting, when you asked why I supported your investigation, I never fully answered. You said you had personal reasons. He nodded, opening his desk drawer to remove a framed photograph. My sister worked in a commercial kitchen for 20 years. She died of pulmonary fibrosis last year, before any of this came to light. I stared at the smiling woman in the photo, understanding dawning. That's why you were investigating before I even raised concerns. Yes, her doctors couldn't pinpoint the exact cause, but when your reports about the coatings came in, he trailed off. Let's just say I recognized the symptoms. We sat in silence for a moment, united by parallel grief and purpose. We've made progress, I finally said, but there's still so much to do. And now you're in a position to do it. He stood, extending his hand formally. Congratulations, Miss Ray. Or should I say, Madam CEO. My first official day as chief executive dawned clear and bright. As I walked through the main production facility, workers nodded respectfully or called out greetings. Some still looked surprised to see the former assembly line worker in the CEO's position. Others seemed to take it as confirmation that merit really could triumph over politics. Near the testing lab, the newly installed plaque bearing my grandmother's name gleamed under the lights. I paused to touch it briefly, a private moment of remembrance and recommitment. Inside my new office, Desmond's old space, now redecorated to my simpler tastes, I found a delivery waiting. The card read simply, a reminder of why we do what we do. The package contained a custom-made air quality monitor, beautifully crafted and clearly expensive. But what caught my eye was the small brass plate on its base, engraved with words that brought tears to my eyes. Because someone cared enough to speak up, there was no signature, but I knew it came from the kitchen workers who had presented me with the cookbook. I placed it prominently on my desk, where every visitor would see it. My assistant buzzed through on the intercom. Miss Ray, the executive team is assembled in the conference room. Thank you, Nina. I'll be right there. I gathered my notes for the meeting, my first strategic planning session as CEO. The agenda was ambitious, expanding the Safety First certification, developing a whistleblower support program, and creating advancement pathways for production workers with leadership potential. As I headed toward the conference room, I passed a window overlooking the factory floor. Below, the production line hummed efficiently, workers moving with purpose, their environment now among the safest in the industry. This was my revenge. Not destruction, but transformation. Not punishment alone, but lasting change that would protect generations of workers. For the assembly line worker who became CEO, for my grandmother and her damaged lungs, for every person who had ever been silenced when trying to speak truth to power. I had made enemies by refusing to stay silent, but in doing so, I had found my voice and helped others find theirs. If you've stayed with this story until the end, perhaps you recognize something of yourself in it. Maybe you've witnessed wrongdoing and wondered if speaking up would matter. Or perhaps you've been silenced when trying to protect others. Remember this. Change rarely comes from those with the most power. It comes from those with the most courage. Sometimes, making too many enemies is exactly what's needed to create lasting change. Like this story if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary challenges. And share in the comments, what would you have done in Serena's position? Your voice matters here and everywhere else.